Today, I will be reviewing my speech from the 2016 World Championship of Public Speaking. For those of you unfamiliar, the World Championship of Public Speaking is the final round of an international speech contest held by Toastmasters International every single year. From the month of January to the month of August, around 30,000 competitors all around the world compete in a 6-round contest to crown what is called the World Champion of Public Speaking. In 2016, I competed in that contest and I was fortunate enough to place second. This goes to prove that I did some things very well in that speech. However, at the same time, I believe there are certain things that I could have done better. So why am I reviewing my own speech on video? It's because I want to show you the amount of work, the creative decisions, and the thought process that goes into building a speech of this caliber for this audience. More importantly though, I want to show you that even if you get to the top, or in this case, close to the top, you can still find ways to improve yourself. Before we start the review, I just want to give you a warning that this will not be a full review of the entire speech. If I did every single part of the speech, it would be an hour-long video or more. I don't have that amount of time, neither do you. So, we're only going to be focusing on the critical parts of the speech. Secondly, I will be starting and stopping this speech multiple times. If you want to see the uninterrupted version of my 57-word title speech, then I will leave a link in the description down below. Also, if you have any questions about this speech or speech preparation in general, please leave it in the comment section down below, and I will definitely get to your question. Let's jump into the review.
Aaron Beverly, leave a lasting memory using as few words as possible and strive with every fiber of your being to avoid being the type of person who rambles on and on with no end in sight, more likely than not causing more listeners to sit and think to themselves, "Oh my goodness, can somebody please make this stop?"
The title, word for word, is 57 words long. This was probably the biggest highlight of the speech. Usually, a speech coach in these contests will say that your speech titles have to be short in order for them to be memorable. My thought is, you can't be different if you're doing the same thing as everybody else. So I decided to take a little bit of a risk. The beauty about it is that in Toastmaster tradition, the person who leads the contest has to read the title twice. This means that the poor contest chair had to read 114 words. 118 words if you count the fact that he had to say my first and last name twice as well. The best part about the title reading is that he had to stop and silence the crowd.
Leave a lasting memory using as few words as possible.
This is all before I stepped on stage. And then once he was done, you can actually see the look of relief on his face. So no, my title was not short, but I guarantee you that it was memorable. And I believe the reason why it worked so well is because of what I would say a little bit later on in the speech. Okay, let's break this part down. This was a great example of using pause. I needed to use pause to make sure that I allowed the audience to finish laughing, because one thing that I did not want to happen was my audience laughing over my first few words and then not being able to hear what those first few words were. So I decided to take a deliberate pause to allow my audience to recover from the laughter. Now for my first critique, there was a definite contrast between my body language and the emotion that the audience was feeling. When I came out, I looked very somber, and some people said even kind of angry. Well, the reason why I didn't smile was because I thought that if I smiled, it would be counted as an action to the audience, and my time would start before I wanted it to. Looking back on it, I would have decided to smile so that I could match the energy and the feel of the audience. That was more important than milking some extra time. Another point that just bothers me personally, Why am I blinking so much? I don't know whether it's nervousness or the light, but it just bothers me. I digress. Let's continue.
Be honest. You enjoyed that, didn't you? Now, please do me a favor. Recite that entire title off the top of your head right now. Go. Not all at once.
Okay, here I want to break down 2 lines. The first one is, be honest. You enjoyed that, didn't you? This line actually came out of a mistake that I made in practice. When I was practicing my speech building up to the World Championship of Public Speaking, I was getting on stage and I noticed that the microphone wasn't set correctly. My speech title had already been given, and now I'm walking on stage, I'm noticing that the microphone isn't set up properly, so I had to adjust it. I basically needed to stall for time. So I decided to just blurt out the first thing that came to my head. Be honest. You enjoyed that, didn't you? And people laughed. I took note of this and then I put it into another practice session and people laughed again. Once people laughed the second time, I knew I was onto something, so I decided to make it a permanent part of my speech. The second line, repeat that phrase off the top of your head. This line came as a result of an evaluation that I received when I was doing another one of my practice sessions. Before I incorporated this line, I had a different one where I would ask a question to the audience. How many of you can remember that title off the top of your head? There would always be somebody who would raise their hand. There is no way possible that they could memorize all 57 of the words in that title in such a short amount of time. But the feedback that I received was, if you don't want a question answered, don't ask the question. So I had to find a way to take out that rhetorical question and implement something that was just as strong. What I ended up doing was just asking the people to recite the title instead. Once I told people to repeat the title, then nobody responded, which is exactly what I wanted.
Wait a minute. Do you mean to tell me that you cannot remember all 57 of the words in that title? Neither can I. But do you know what that proves? Just because you say more doesn't mean people will remember what you say.
This line is the only reason why the 57-word title worked. A lot of people don't know this, but 3 years prior to the 2016 contest, I tried to use another long title in a speech. People absolutely hated it. And the reason why, it was because it had nothing to do with the speech. It was just an absurdly long title. It was an empty gimmick. It had no effect on the speech whatsoever. By adding that one line, I created a purpose for the 57-word title. The title served as a demonstration for saying a lot and having people not remembering what you said. Now, it was still a gimmick, but it was no longer an empty gimmick because it enhanced the speech.
Outside of a Toastmasters club, I actually do not talk a lot. I've always been called a quiet person. In fact, if you went back in time to my college and told the other students that one day Aaron Beverly will speak in front of over 1,000 people at a Toastmasters convention, they would say, wow, that's amazing. Aaron can talk?
Comedy and laughter usually comes when the audience is expecting one thing, but then you give them another. What I did was make the audience believe that a person from my college would be surprised by the fact that I was on stage. I made them laugh because I surprised them by revealing that they didn't think I could talk at all. This is an example of comedic misdirection. Aside from the lack of smiling and the blinking, honestly, I was looking pretty good at the start. I started off extremely strong. Then things started to get a little messy.
I remember a former colleague of mine from work. His name was Austin. The year was 2013, early in the morning. Me and Austin were standing at a bus stop, waiting for the bus that takes us to work.
Okay, let's pause right here. Look at this face. This is the face of a guy who knows he just fudged up. If you are a strict grammarian, you probably know that I should have said Austin and I instead of me and Austin. Now, it was still understandable. However, The judging criteria includes grammar, and in this case, it wasn't grammatically correct.
Now, the bus driver, she was about 35 to 40 years old. Every day her bus would pull up, she would open the bus doors, and she would greet every passenger in the nicest way possible, like this.
This is another case of misdirection. I told the audience that I was going to give them one thing, but then gave them something that was completely the opposite. Basically, I told the audience that the bus lady of doom was going to greet people in a nice way and went the opposite route, showing them that indeed the bus lady of doom was not nice.
She was actually the meanest person I have ever met in my life. Do you know what the passengers called her? Bus Lady of Doom. The only time I ever heard her laugh was the day she left someone at the bus station.
Now here I want to point out the example of characterization. Creating a memorable character can be done by something as simple as the character's name. I introduced the character as the Bus Lady of Doom instead of introducing her with a name like Sally or Jane. This is a technique that you can use to add more characterization to your characters by giving them the name of a trait rather than an actual name. There are many benefits to this. One, it gives you more characterization, as I said, but it also gives you a level of exaggeration, which gives the audience an opportunity to once again laugh. Another advantage is that if you have a lot of characters in your story, you don't want to boggle down the audience's brains with a whole bunch of names. Instead, you just give them a defining trait, so that way they have an image to remember the character by instead of having to memorize a name. By saying the Bus Lady of Doom, the audience knows that this person is mean, evil, or nasty. And I did not have to say any of those words to make the audience think that.
Have you ever met anyone like this? There we are, me and Austin, standing at the bus stop.
At least I'm consistent.
What happened next, I still cannot believe. Austin hops on the bus, but he stops. He turns. He looks the Bus Lady of Doom in the eye and he says, "How are you today, beautiful?" But with a few words, Austin turned someone mean and grumpy into someone happy. He reminded me of a time when I made someone happy with just a few words. When I was still living with my mom, I walked up to her one day and I said the words that all parents dream about. "Mom, I'm moving out of the house." My mom said, "Yes!" I'm joking. She was way more excited than that. Now, I have not seen Austin in 3 years, but he reminded me back then and today, a few words, they can make people happy.
Now here's something that I did that a lot of people don't do in this contest. Contestants in the Toastmasters International Speech Contest typically use what is called the rule of 3. And in the rule of 3, they decide to use 3 stories that will then combine into one central point. I decided not to do this. Instead, in my speech, what you'll find is that I only told 2 stories. Well, to be more specific, 2 stories and 1 anecdote. What you just heard about my mom was the anecdote. That anecdote would not be able to stand alone in the speech. It's not its own defining story. It supported the first story. It goes to show you that you don't always have to follow the model or the formula.
A few words can do something extraordinary. I'm in my Toastmasters club. It's time for the best part of the meeting that every Toastmaster loves, table topics. The topics master stood on the stage. He called out, "May I please have the first volunteer?" There was one hand, but that hand was special because it belonged to a young, soft-spoken young lady named Michelle.
So much to talk about here. I may look calm and poised, but in my mind at this point, I'm thinking, oh my God, I messed up big time. Firstly, I messed up the line, "the best part of the meeting." This was a stumble that I could not hide, And I started thinking about, oh no, will the judges mark me down for that? And yeah, the judges probably would, but that should not be where my focus is. This is the part where I was really getting inside of my own head and worrying about the judging instead of worrying about my audience and how my audience was going to take away my message. Secondly, I tripped up when I was introducing the character of Michelle. The actual phrase I had practiced was a shy, soft-spoken young lady named Michelle. And again, I'm thinking in my head, oh no, did the judges catch that too? My focus should not have been on the judges and how they were going to critique me, but instead it should have been focused on delivering the best message to my audience. What I'll share later on is how being in my own head really negatively affected my performance in a way that made me truly regret a very critical part of my speech.
Michelle was from China. She was attending college in America. 19 years old and speaking in front of an audience terrified her. But there she was, standing on that stage.
This is where you notice that the tone of the speech started to shift. It went from a very fast-paced and punchy speech to a very slow, methodical, and deep speech. You notice that I'm using my voice, my pace, and pausing to create a more somber feel in the second half of the speech.
The Toastmaster read the question. What was the greatest moment of your life? And she froze. For what must have felt like eternity to her, all she could do was stare at the floor. 10 seconds passed, and she still could not speak. 20 seconds passed. Her lips began to tremble. 30 seconds passed. She cried.
Something else that you should keep in mind, especially if you are going to be on video, is where are your eyes landing? What I started noticing was that my eyes would cut away randomly to the middle of the audience. This is where the timer was. Throughout the speech, I'm looking at the timers table randomly, and that is taking my focus off of my audience and onto the timer. This is something that probably didn't affect the judging of the speech contest, but keep it in mind as you are being video recorded in your future speeches. You have to be deliberate with your eye contact.
Until she finally spoke, and she shared the greatest moment of her life. When my mom said she believed in me.
The line when my mom said she believed in me was my absolute favorite line in the entire speech. It was so moving and so powerful, yet extremely simple. And here is where I reveal my biggest regret. Because I was so caught up in my head, because I was thinking about the judging and the timing, I did not deliver this line with the justice that it deserved. Now you may be thinking, Aaron, you delivered that line just fine. And there are even people who have come to me after the speech saying that they thought that this line was the best line in there and that they really felt something from it. But I didn't feel as strongly as I did when I was practicing the speech before. And that is the reason why I regret it. Because I should have given that line with so much more feeling that I was proud of the line. And to be honest, this is a regret that I hold even today. But on the brighter side, I want to point out another example of misdirection. This time not to be used for comedy, but to be used for deep emotion. In this story with Michelle, I had the audience thinking that the reason why she was crying was because of her fear of public speaking. This turned out not to be the case. The true reason why Michelle was crying was because of the words her mother said. Now, what the audience was probably thinking at that point was that there was going to be somebody in the audience who would come up and console Michelle, and they would be the hero that would help her overcome her fear of public speaking. To be honest, that would have been very cliche and very boring. What made the words of Michelle's mother so powerful was that you did not know Michelle's mother was coming. It was more emotional because the audience was not expecting to go there.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that it's okay to be a quiet person, to be soft-spoken, to not say that much. Because when it comes to being remembered, I've learned, and you've proven, just because you say more doesn't mean people will remember what you say. So let's make the words we do say count. You'll be surprised how long people remember a few words.
Now, here are my final thoughts. Overall, I think I did a good job. Don't let my critiques of myself make you believe that I am not proud of my achievement and this speech. Now, the question of the day you're probably asking, do I think these mistakes cost me the World Championship of Public Speaking and that first place trophy? Do I think I could have won? Yes. Do I believe I would have won if I did not make these mistakes? Who knows? The judging for the Toastmaster contest is confidential and it is never revealed to anyone. However, I just personally feel that I left the stage knowing that I did not give it my absolute best. And now what has become one of my goals is to get back on that world stage, not to go for the win, but to go on stage and know that I gave it everything that I had, that I gave the audience the best value, and that I was present the entire time. Perhaps one day that will happen, but it will only happen if I continue to review and get better and improve. And hopefully I've given you some insight and tips to let you know how you can review, how you can improve, and how you can get better at public speaking. This is Aaron Beverly, the proud second place winner of the 2016 World Championship of Public Speaking. Until next time, take care.